Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, April 13th, and this is day 190. There have been significant escalations in the West Bank over the last 24 to 48 hours. A Palestinian village has been attacked and set on fire. It's been reported that hundreds of armed Israeli soldiers stormed a village in the occupied West Bank yesterday, on Friday, setting fire to several homes and cars in one of the largest attacks by settlers this year. At least one Palestinian man has been killed by gunfire in the village of Al-Mughayir, east of Ramallah. Yesterday, and I reported about this in my daily update, a 14-year-old Israeli boy from one of the neighboring settlements was reported missing. He was found this morning having been killed. The boy's name was Binyamin Ahameyer. He went out yesterday morning with sheep to graze in the West Bank. He'd left the settlement in the morning, did not return home. Some of the sheep returned home. Later, search parties were sent out into the West Bank, and eventually his body was found. From the condition of his body, it clearly indicated perhaps there was an altercation, but that he had been killed. The attack on the village of Al-Mughayir seemed to indicate that 25 or more people had been injured in the rampage, the scale of which has not been seen since hundreds of settlers stormed through villages of Termusaya and Hawara in two separate incidents last year. According to local reports, Israeli security forces had actually arrived in the village and still allowed the settlers to continue their attacks. Some estimates say that as many as 1,000 to 1,200 settlers surrounded the village and 500 people stormed it just about midday local time yesterday on Friday, that all of the roads in the area were blocked. Reports do indicate that the Israeli army came after the attacks began, but that they stood by and allowed for them to continue. According to CNN, the settlers attacked the village, raided homes, fired guns at residents. Videos obtained showed parts of the village burning, smoke billowing over buildings, and settlers lobbing rocks. Houses and cars were completely burned up, and the sounds of gunfire and clashes can be heard in the background of the video. These are retaliatory attacks. You may recall in the summer of 2014, there were 3 Israeli teenagers who were settlers that were reported missing. They were missing for days and then eventually found dead. There was a 16-year-old Palestinian from Jerusalem who was kidnapped and then burned alive. These were all precursor actions to what escalated into the summer 2014 Gaza war, which at that time was the worst war Gaza had seen. Of course, the death tolls today make the 2014 war look like it was nothing. Yesterday, I raised significant concerns about escalations between Iran and Israel. Those continue to be deeply disconcerting. I will talk about those in a minute. I do want to talk about the way that Israel has addressed these clashes and what's happening in the West Bank. Palestinian sources identified that numerous villages have been affected, that houses have been burned. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society also said that there was a 14-year-old Palestinian boy who has been wounded by gunfire, that there was also a village in the West Bank called Duma that has been affected by settler attacks. The Israeli Defense Minister Gallant condemned the rampaging settlers and said that acts of revenge will make our forces' jobs harder. Do not take law into your own hands. There were 2 Israeli human rights, seemingly 2 human rights activists. They were Israeli photographers who were attacked and beaten by Israeli settlers during the riots in Al-Mughayir in the West Bank yesterday. And the Israeli army announced that it will bolster its troops in the West Bank following these incidents. In terms of what's happening with Iran, President Biden came home from Delaware a day early today, Saturday, to connect with his senior officials to consult on matters related to the Middle East. This indicates that the situation is serious. I shared yesterday that officials here in the US and in Israel that I really trust are deeply concerned that if things do not de-escalate, that we could be on the brink of a very serious war in the Middle East, that could even escalate more broadly, to other parts of the world. The United States has been very clear that we would engage and that we would support Israel. Iran took action today. Iranian commando forces raided by helicopter an Israeli-linked vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, which is near the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, port town of Fujairah. And Iran later confirmed that the seizing of this ship, which is linked to Israel, they said it's being transferred to Iranian territory. Joe Biden, our president, said yesterday in a message to Iran, that Iran should not take action against Israel. His one-word response was don't. In speaking to reporters, he said that we are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. You might recall I also shared Defense Secretary Austin's words that Israel has our full support and that our support of Israel is ironclad. The Israeli Defense spokesperson Hagari said yesterday that the Israeli army is ready in defense and offense amid fears of an Iranian attack. He emphasized there are no changes to the home front's command instruction for Israeli citizens. Referring to the seizure of this Israeli-linked vessel, he said Iran will bear the consequences for choosing to escalate the situation any further. Israel is on high alert. We have increased our readiness to protect Israel from any further Iranian aggression. We are prepared to respond. The Wall Street Journal reported that the U.S. has moved warships in an effort to preempt a direct attack on Israel, after a warning from a person familiar with the matter about the timing and location of a potential Iranian attack. However, a source that was briefed by Iran's leadership said that plans for an attack have been discussed, but that a final decision has not yet been made. The U.S. Secretary of State met with Foreign Minister Safadi yesterday to discuss the need to avoid further escalation in the region by Iran, as much as diplomatic efforts to achieve an enduring end to the crisis in Gaza. That was reported by State Department spokesperson Miller. And Blinken also met with Egypt's Foreign Minister Shukri last night, reiterating that an escalation by Iran would not benefit anyone in the region. 2 U.S. officials told CNN that the U.S. will attempt to intercept any weapons launched at Israel if it is feasible to do so. Some foreign countries have issued travel guidance to Israel. Poland said that they are advising against travel to Israel, the Palestinian territories, and Lebanon. Canada told its citizens to avoid travel to Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. Germany warned its citizens to leave Iran. The Netherlands is going to close its embassy in Tehran tomorrow as a precaution, according to the Dutch Foreign Ministry. KLM Royal Dutch Airlines said it will no longer fly over Israel and Iran. In Gaza, Israel reported that it had fighter jets struck 3 rocket launchers in Gaza, in which 20 rockets were set to be launched into central Israel. And may we not forget what's happening in Gaza. The death toll there today is 33,686 killed. Those wounded is at 76,309 injured. Demonstrations against the Israeli government calling for the release of hostages continue and are expected to continue tonight, Saturday evening. Family members of hostages held in Gaza are holding press conferences in Israel and are accusing Netanyahu of sabotaging deals that might guarantee the return of hostages. 8 rockets have been fired into southern Israel, the city of Sderot, yesterday, several of which were intercepted. There have been continued escalations on the northern border of Israel with the southern border of Lebanon. The air defense system that Israel has intercepted 2 explosive Hezbollah drones. It added, according to the IDF, 40 rocket launches were detected in the latest barrage fired at the Upper Galilee region of Israel. Israel's army said that they had 3 rockets fired from Lebanon into Israel's north and 2 drones exploded into West Galilee. A member of Kibbutz Hanata's security squad has been wounded by one of those exploding drones. Israel also said that they struck Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon. I did want to talk for a minute about Capitol Hill. A Republican-backed resolution was voted to advance yesterday. This resolution denounces President Biden's, quote, one-sided pressure on Israel with respect to Gaza. Republicans are saying President Biden is not supportive of Israel enough. So this resolution is saying that the pressure on Israel is too one-sided, in favor of Palestinians. House Democrats are fuming over Republicans' colleagues' plan to hold a vote next week denouncing what Republicans are saying is President Biden's one-sided pressure on Israel. It's a 3-page non-binding resolution. It was introduced by Representative Maria Salazar from Florida that opposes, quote, efforts to place one-sided pressure on Israel with respect to Gaza, end quote. This is citing Prime Minister Netanyahu's call with Biden earlier this month, in which President Biden urged an immediate ceasefire. That's what we've been calling for. And also Biden's call for Netanyahu to have a major shift in Israeli conduct in Gaza. This resolution also takes aim at the U.S. decision to not veto that UN Security Council resolution last month that called for a ceasefire. You may recall that they abstained. The House vote yesterday advanced the resolution. The final vote will be next week. Democrats, it's expected to pass next week, by the way. It's non-binding, but Democrats will help it pass if it does. Representative Golden from Maine, who's a Democrat, Representative Davis from North Carolina, they are expected to support the resolution. 46 Democrats broke from the Democratic Party in voting for a standalone Israel aid package in February that Democratic leaders opposed because it did not include aid for Ukraine and Palestinians. Several other Israel-related measures have garnered about a dozen Democratic defections. In other words, they're voting against the party, such as one in December that was equating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. In other words, we really think it's critically important. You can criticize the state of Israel. That's not anti-Semitic, right? So there was a bill in December that was equating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And several Democrats, around a dozen, voted for that in December. 22 Democrats voted with Republicans in November to censure Rashida Tlaib around language that was in a controversial pro-Palestinian chant. This particular resolution stands apart because it takes direct aim at President Biden, and many Democrats are undecided about how they're going to vote. They are frustrated because it is politicizing the war in Gaza. On other issues, this is quite significant. The New York Times editorial board called on the U.S. to condition military aid to Israel, saying that Netanyahu has turned his back on America and its entreaties, and that the U.S. cannot remain beholden to an Israeli leader fixated on his own survival and the approval of the zealots he harbors. That's quite significant. And Wendy Sherman, who until recently was Blinken's top deputy at the State Department, sharply criticized Israel's handling of the Gaza war, saying that food is not a weapon of war, and saying that Israel is better than the way that this war is being waged. Ireland is very close to recognizing a Palestinian state and might do so in concert with Spain and other like-minded countries. I just would remind you, if Palestine is recognized as a state at the UN, the Biden administration has made it very clear it will be legally obligated according to US law, and they've made it very clear they have every intention to apply this law to withdraw US funding from the UN system. And finally, Churches for Middle East Peace joined Save the Children and more than 250 humanitarian and human rights organizations calling for an end to arms transfers to Israel and Palestinian armed groups to help bring an end to the atrocities happening in Gaza and in Israel.